Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is going to be the second part in our introduction to Finale, where we are going to go over some of the new techniques that we did not cover in the first piece on my second piece. So if you want to go ahead and download the Finale packet or open it up, however you have it, and then go ahead and get to that second piece so you can follow along with me. If you remember, for the first piece, we just set up a default document and went from there. Today, I'm actually going to walk you through the setup wizard and how useful that can be for future projects. So as you can see, we've already got Finale open, and let's go ahead and click on Setup Wizard. Okay, so we have Setup Wizard open. It gives me this new window, and it has a bunch of pre-built ensembles that we can go through if you have, or if you're, say, writing for a string quartet or a jazz band or a brass trio. They're all pre-built for you, and that's fine. But for 90% of what I do in Finale and what you will probably end up doing in Finale, I would just keep it on Create New Ensemble, and that way you can just start from scratch each time. So to the right of that, we've got our document styles. So there's several different styles here. I usually just leave it on either engraved or handwritten. Engraved gives you that nice music print font look, and then handwritten gives you the sort of ink pen look that you might see in some jazz lead sheets. So let's just go ahead and leave it on engraved style for now. Then here we've got our page sizes, of course. Score page size refers to the score, part refers to the parts that are exported. We're going to leave this all as default, which is 8.5 by 11 in portrait orientation. Go ahead and hit next. And so now this is where we actually get to add our instruments to our score. So we've got our instrument families. And then if we click through the different families, you'll notice that we get all of the instruments within that family. And so what we can do is we can go through and choose an instrument and then add it to our score, which is right here. So if we look at our score in the Finale packet, we see that we have a piece for cello and piano. So let's go ahead and get a piano. Let's add that to our score just by clicking add, and you'll see that we have piano here now. And now let's find cello. So cello is going to be part of the string instrument family, and there it is, and then there's cello right there. Go ahead and add that. Okay, so we have piano and cello. And so now we just need to do one last thing. You'll notice that the cello is actually below the piano here in this score, but in our Finale packet, it's above the piano because it is the soloist. So let's go ahead and change that. And the way we do that is just by selecting the cello and then clicking this little arrow up, and that will move the cello above the piano. And then if this was an ensemble that you write for often, say maybe for your own band or something like that, you could save this as a new ensemble, and that way it just makes going through the setup wizard that much more quickly. So now let's go ahead and hit next. And then here we're going to put in all of our meta information. So we're going to put our title in. Okay. And I have caps lock on, so let's try that again. There we go. And then a subtitle if you had one, for instance, for string quartet or for concert band. Composer would go here. We're going to skip that for today. Arranger, lyricist, copyright. Let's go ahead and insert our copyright information. Got some stray keystrokes in there. All right, that looks good to me. So here's we now have all of our score information set up in there. Usually you'd put your name in composer or arranger or wherever else, but that we have something special saved for that for this piece. So let's just go ahead and hit next through the setup wizard. Okay, so now we can specify our score settings. For instance, we can choose our time signature, our tempo, if we have an initial tempo marking, our key signature, and a pickup measure, if we have a pickup measure, which we actually do have in this piece. So let's start with our time signature. So my second piece is in 3/8. So let's go ahead and select 3/8. Let's specify initial tempo marking of allegretto. And the tempo is going to be 8th note equals 172. Okay, and then key signature, it looks like we have no sharps or flats, so we can just leave it in C major for now. And then let's specify the pickup measure. So go ahead and check that box. And then our pickup measure is exactly 1/8 note. So we'll go ahead and select the 8th note. And now we've got our pickup measure selected. So let's go ahead and hit finish, and this will generate our score. There we go. We have our score here. So now let's go ahead and start working on the piece. So in the first lecture, when we were going over my first piece, I used exclusively simple entry, and this is perfectly fine way to go about inserting notes into the score. However, if you are working with larger ensembles or longer pieces, it does get a little bit tedious. So I do recommend getting used to speedy entry. So that's what we're going to go over for today. So speedy entry is right next to simple entry. We just go ahead and click on it. And the way this works is that you click on the first measure, or if it's a new piece, it'll automatically go to the first measure for you. You play a note on your MIDI keyboard, and then you type in the note value for that pitch on your QWERTY keyboard. So if you go ahead and look at the first page of your Finale packet, you should see a little picture of all of the speedy entry keyboard shortcuts. And just to sum it up, 5 is kind of like our home base. That's a quarter note. And anything above and below that is exactly one note value, shorter or longer than that. So 5 is quarter, 4 is eighth, 6 is half, 3 is 16th, 7 is whole, 2 is 32nd, 8 is a double whole note. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter in the pitches for the cello part here. And you see we have a tie across the measure. That's not a slur, that is a tie. And the easiest way to do that is just hit T on your keyboard. That starts the tie, and then go ahead and just insert the very next note, which is an F sharp, as an eighth note, and then continue on playing the notes in. Another tie, so we'll hit T, insert that next note, another tie. And then you'll notice here in this measure, we actually have a clef change. Let's ignore the clef change for now and just input those notes as we would in that clef, and we'll go back later to change the clef. So the first note starting there is going to be an A, so we'll just continue up with A. And then a dotted quarter note. Easiest way to get a dot at the end of a note is just by playing the note value and then period after that, and that will give us a dot on the note. So you'll see here we've got our measure. It's still in bass clef, so we need to go ahead and insert that clef change. So the easiest way to do that, just go up to our toolbar here, go ahead and select this clef tool, and then let's go ahead and just click and drag and select all of these pitches here. There we go, we've got those pitches selected, double click, and that brings us into our clef change window. So let's go ahead and select the correct clef. And then down here where it says measure region, that's indicating how long this clef change is going to be in effect. Let's go ahead and just set that to the next clef change. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see there we have the proper clef change. Don't worry about the collisions for now. We'll come back after we've inserted everything else and fix that in due time. So let's go ahead and just continue on with our inserting of the cello line, and pay attention in measure 6, 7, 8. We have another clef change back into bass clef, so pay attention to that. And let's go ahead and finish out this cello part. Okay, so if you've made it through that clef change and you've got the clef change in there correctly, as you can see in the very next measure, we have a couple of double stops in the cello. This is the best part about speedy entry, is that it's very easy to enter multiple notes at once, as you will see here. All we do is just play B flat and G on the MIDI keyboard and go ahead and just type the note values in, and it'll insert it as a chord. So let's go ahead and do that and finish out this cello part. And there you go. You've inserted all of the cello part. So you see here that we've reached the end of our cello line, and that is in fact at the end of the piece. So let's go ahead and just get rid of these extra measures that we don't need. So let's go ahead and control click all of these, right click, and let's just go ahead and delete measure stack. There we go. That'll clean up our page here in our workspace and make it a little bit easier to work with. All right, so now let's go ahead and do the same thing in the piano. However, before we get started, I just want to address what is happening there in measure 5. If you draw your attention to measure 5, you'll notice that we've got a string of 16th notes going across the two steps from bass clef to treble clef. So let's go ahead and just start with that, and I'll go ahead and walk you through it. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's correct. And let's go ahead and use speedy entry to enter all of these pitches into the bass clef staff. So starting with this C, and then continue entering the notes in the correct register. We're just still in the left hand. Okay, so we have all of our notes inserted there. We just now need these last three notes to be up in the right hand of the piano. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to be using the Note Mover tool. Now the Note Mover tool is found in our advanced toolbar. So if you don't see this toolbar, make sure you go to Window and make sure that the advanced tools palette is checked as being viewable. So in this advanced toolbars, the Note Mover tool is this little guy here with the 2/8 notes and the arrows. Let's go ahead and click on that. Then let's click in the actual measure that we want to move notes, and you'll notice these handles will appear next to the note heads. Let's just click and drag and select the last three notes. And now all we need to do is just click on the handle, drag the notes up to the top staff, and drop them in. And you'll notice that the notes dropped in automatically. Now, if this is your first time using Finale and you haven't used this tool before, it is most likely going to default with copy and replace. What this is going to do is it's just going to copy the note heads up, and we're not going to get that cross staff notation that we like. So you need to make sure that you have cross staff selected under the note mover dropdown in Finale. Okay. So now let's just go ahead and fix a couple of things here. So let's go to so we now need to just fix the stem and the beaming for this. If you notice in the score that we're working with, it's actually going between the staffs. So we're going to fix that with our special tools palette. So you click on this little wrench here that opens up a secondary tool palette over here on the right. And let's just go ahead and find our beam tool. There's our beam angle tool. So we select that. Go ahead and click in that measure again, and we'll have now two handles popped up here. So let's go ahead and just click on this first handle here and drag that up to the middle of the staff. And you'll notice that we now have the beam in the middle of the staff. The last thing we need to do is just fix these stems on these notes in the left hand. You'll notice that the stems are actually on the wrong side. So let's go back into our special tools palette and find the reverse stem tool. Let's click on that. And let's just click on these bottom handles. As we click, that fixes the stems, and now all the stems are going in the correct direction. We just now need to readjust that beam height, and there we go. We have our cross staff notation. The last thing that we do actually have to do in order to make this look good is we need to get rid of this rest up here in the right hand, because in our score in the Finale packet, there is no rest in the right hand. So the best way to do this, that I like to do this, is just use Speedy Entry. Click on that right hand. Go ahead and insert a dotted quarter rest by just typing 5 period without playing anything on the keyboard. Go back into Speedy Entry and select the rest and go ahead and hit H on your keyboard. That will hide the rest, and there will be no rest showing in that measure in the right hand when you do print this out. Okay, so now that we have the hardest part of this score inserted into the piano, go ahead and insert the rest of the pitches in the piano using whichever method you prefer, speedy or simple. I do recommend getting used to Speedy Entry if you can, but simple entry will work just fine for this instance. Okay, so if you're in the last measure of the piano, you'll notice that we go into 2 voices in the treble clef staff. So just a quick recap on how you do that. Go ahead and select voice 2. We have voice 2 selected. Still using Speedy Entry, go ahead and just click in that measure and go ahead and play the notes with the stem downs as if you were inserting them into just a regular measure. And just like that, we have our 2 voices in there, and all the stems are going the correct direction. Let's go ahead and finish up this piano part by inserting the left hand, and don't forget to switch back to voice 1. Okay, with that, you should have all of the notes inserted into both stabs, the cello and the piano lines. And from here, we will now continue putting in the rest of the fine touches. So let's go ahead and start with the dynamics and hairpins within the score. So just a quick reminder, the dynamics are found under the expression tool, the MF, and the hairpins, crescendos and decrescendos are found under the smart shape tool. Over here on the side, you got crescendo and decrescendo. And quick reminder, if you look at the expression tool and you open up the window, you'll notice that there are numbers and letters in the upper right-hand corners of each expression. Those are our keyboard hotkeys. So if I were to hold down a 4 and then click underneath a note with my mouse, that would insert a forte without going into this expression selection box. All right, we should have all of the dynamics and hairpins inserted into the score now. Don't worry about collisions just yet. We will come back at the very end and fix all of the collisions and make this look like a good looking score. So let's continue on and let's insert all of our slurs, and those are also found in our Smart Shapes dialog box, and they're just the very top tool, the slur tool. And remember, if you have a 2-note slur, if you just double click on the first note, that'll automatically slur 2 notes together. But to slur more than one, you need to double click and hold on the second click, then drag to the last note of the slur. So let's go ahead and insert all the slurs. And that should do it for the slurs. So now that we have all of the slurs, the dynamics, and the crescendos and decrescendos inserted into the score, let's go ahead and put in the final touch, which is the articulations. These are how we are actually going to play the notes. So the articulation tool is right next to the Smart Shapes tool. It's the accented half note. And another quick reminder, if we were to double click on this first note for the piano, if we're going to insert this accent, double click, you'll notice that the articulations all have letters in the upper right-hand corner as well. Those are our hotkeys for articulations. So if I were to hold down an A and then click, that would insert an accent without going into this dialog box. So go ahead and utilize that and take the time to remember what these main ones are. For instance, staccato, tenutos, and accents are. So that way you can quickly insert many articulations back to back without having to go back and forth into this articulation selection box. Okay, and before we finish up with these articulations, just one last quick tip for inserting a lot of articulations is that if you know the hotkey for an articulation and you have a lot of those to insert into a long string of measures or into multiple staves in a larger score, there's really quick and easy way to do this, and that is holding down the hotkey for the articulation. So for the I am in measure 9 for the accented staccato note, that hotkey is Z. So I'm going to hold down Z, and then I'm just going to click and drag as if I'm selecting all of these notes here in this last measure, and then release, and that inserted the correct articulation on every single note in that staff. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of these notes here that all have that accented staccato note. And there we go. And then we just put the accent in on the final notes there. And one last bit of articulation, which is this final note in the cello, and that is the harmonic, which is found under the articulations box, and that is number 22, the little open circle. So let's go ahead and insert that. And that should be it for articulations. So if your score looks like this, you should be in the right spot within as far as progress is concerned. So now that we have all the articulations in, let's start cleaning up this score and making it look rather presentable. Because right now it doesn't look very good. It's really messy, hard to read. So the first step in doing that is that we're actually going to utilize the resize tool to resize these staffs into a more appropriate size for this piece of music and to fit the page better. Now, if you look at your finale packet, you'll notice that the cello's part is actually smaller than the piano part. And that's because very often with piano accompaniment music, as I'm sure you've noticed, the solo part is smaller in size to save page space, and it's really only there for reference for the pianist. So with that, the way that we're going to achieve this is with the resize tool, which is over here in our toolbar, and that's the percent sign or modulo sign. So go ahead and select that tool. And then in this little white space between the 3/8 time signature and the first note of the cello, just go ahead and double click in there. And that brings up our resize staff dialog box. So right now it's at 100%, which is where all default sizes are. So let's go ahead and resize that. And to me, this staff looks like it's pretty close to about 75%. And you'll notice it's resized, and that does actually look pretty close to what our packet looks like to me. So now we're not done there because the piano part also looks like it's resized just a little bit, probably 85 or 90%. Not quite as small as the cello, but definitely not as big as what we have here in our finale packet. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to start with 90% and see how that looks. Yeah, that looks just about right for me. So I'm going to do that for the bottom staff as well. And that looks about right for me. And so I'm going to leave those at 90%. So again, I've got the cello staff at 75% and the piano staffs at 90%. So with that, let's just go ahead and double check, make sure that fixed all of our collisions. I still see a couple of collisions in there, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on this F and drag that down a little bit so it's not colliding with that accent. We're good there, good there, good there. And it looks like this pianissimo is colliding just a little bit, so I'm going to drag that up too. And there we go. Basically, a general rule of thumb when engraving a score or going through the final edit, you don't want any object on the score to touch another object. When it does that, that's called a collision, and those are not wanted in a good-looking score. All right, so now that everything is fixed up and looking nice, let's go ahead and just insert this final piece into the score, and that is the composer. You'll notice in our packet that the composer is actually a symbol. Now, to be more specific, that is actually the Prince love symbol. And the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to utilize this graphics tool in the advanced toolbar. It's the one with the cube, pyramid, and sphere. And we're going to use that to insert a graphic into the score. But first, you need to get the graphic. Now, I've already downloaded this graphic, but I'm just going to go ahead and open it up so that way you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to open up a new browser tab, and the graphic that you're looking for is actually the Prince symbol. So I just typed Prince love symbol into the browser, and I just went to images, and I just basically looked for an image that was black with either a white or transparent background, and you want to make sure that the image is a .png or .jpeg for the most compatible results. So back in Finale now, I've already downloaded this graphic, so I'm going to double click where I want to insert the graphic. That brings up this option for me to select a graphic, and it is this first one here, and you'll see that it's a .jpeg. So we'll select it, and it inserts it into the score, and you'll notice that we do need to resize it. So I'm going to go ahead and just resize it while holding Shift on my keyboard and dragging from the corner. That preserves the ratios and dimensions, and then just move it to the correct spot. I'm going to resize it a little bit more, and there we go. We have a graphic in the score. With that, that should complete your piece, and you are now well on your way into becoming a Finale expert. Just to recap, we went over the setup wizard within Finale and how you can utilize that for larger ensembles. We went through speedy entry and how easy that is for inserting a lot of notes really quickly and not taking a lot of time. I do recommend getting used to that and utilizing it if you do find yourself working in Finale a lot. We also went over clef changes, as you can see here, and we went over cross-staff notation in the piano. And finally, we went over how you go ahead and actually resize a staff within the score to whatever size you want, and then inserting a graphic into the score. If there were any tools we went over that were not explicitly clear to you, I highly recommend going to the user manual within Finale. And the easiest way to get to that is just go to the help drop down here and just click on user manual. And what that'll do is that'll automatically open the Finale user manual into our browser. And you can see here, it's very intuitive. Go ahead and just click on whatever you need to click on, and it goes over the tool and how exactly it works. So, and you can also search up here if there's something more specific you wanted to learn about. So with that, this was my second piece in the Finale packet, and You should have completed that along with the first piece, and that just leaves 2 more pieces for you to complete within the packet. Just to be clear, the last 2 pieces, the mosaic number 2 and that handwritten score, are both optional. If you do fancy yourself a challenge, you could go through creating mosaic number 2, which is a lot of fun and a good exercise, actually, if you want to get into more advanced notation techniques. All right, so you should be pretty comfortable in Finale now. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.